The well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Good Thursday to you. Thank you for tuning into another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. It is great to have you with us here on the program. Coming up on the show in just a few minutes, Mr. Rob O'Donnell is going to be with us, a retired New York police officer with Brothers Before Others. We're going to be talking with Rob about a number of topics, including the attack at Naval Air Station Pensacola last week, where a loved one of Rob's was actually right there in the thick of that incident. Also, we'll talk about the attack in Jersey City, New Jersey, a couple of days ago by two members of the Black Hebrew Israelites, who authorities say were targeting a kosher deli, and also ambushed and killed a Jersey City police detective, father of five, and a veteran of years on the force there in Jersey City. And finally, we'll talk with Rob O'Donnell about the Second Amendment sanctuary community in Virginia that is rapidly expanding, as well as the threats that we are now hearing from Virginia politicians. In fact, let's get started there, shall we? Virginia Governor Ralph Northam saying that there could be, quote, consequences for those counties that do not enforce the new gun control laws that he wants to put on the books. Now, what those consequences would be, well, he hasn't really said. He was asked by a reporter yesterday if local governments would face retaliation for declaring themselves to be segmented sanctuary communities, and he said, quote, "There's not going to be retaliation. That's not what I'm about. I'm about making Virginia safer." He said if we have constitutional laws on the books and law enforcement officers are not enforcing those laws on the books, then there are going to be consequences. He said, but I'll cross that bridge if and when we get to it. The reporter said that Northam didn't talk about what those potential consequences would be, but based on what we're hearing from some other Virginia politicians, those consequences might involve sending in the National Guard. Yes, Representative Donald McEachin, who is the congressman for the 4th Congressional District in Virginia, says that, it's just one of those things, man. If these counties continue to insist on, recognizing the Second Amendment, well, gosh, we got to send in the National Guard to these counties to try to enforce the law. Congressman Jerry Connolly from Northern Virginia, full confession, when I lived in Northern Virginia, Congressman Connolly was my representative, and I have never, well, I shouldn't say I've never been so happy. It was one of my happiest moments when I moved to the Farmville, Virginia area, and Jerry Connolly no longer represented me in Congress. Because you know what? He didn't represent me in Congress to begin with. He told the Washington Examiner, quote, that these law enforcement officers, these public officials who are supporting the Second Amendment sanctuary movement, quote, I would hope they would either resign in good conscience because they cannot uphold the law which they are sworn to uphold, or they're prosecuted for failure to fulfill their oath. The law is the law. If that becomes the law, you don't have a choice, not if you're a sworn officer of the law. Can I just say, I try not to curse here on this program, so I'm not going to say what I really want to say, but can I just say that's a bunch of BS? Law enforcement has plenty of discretion in terms of the laws that they want to enforce. You ever been pulled over and instead of getting a speeding ticket, you got a warning? In fact, there was a thread on Reddit, the website Reddit yesterday, in the Ask Reddit subreddit. Boy, that doesn't get convoluted. And the question was posed to law enforcement officers, what law do you not enjoy enforcing or do you not like enforcing? And there were a number of law enforcement officers responded by saying, look, I don't arrest people for low levels of a pot. If I find them with a little bit of pot, I might take it, I might destroy it, but I'll send them on their way. I'm not going to ruin their life over, a joint or two. Lots of folks saying, yeah, you know what? I don't make traffic stops. I really don't see the point in this. There is discretion that is used by law enforcement each and every day in every state of the union. Be it the local cop who might pull you over on a traffic stop or a prosecutor deciding that he's not going to prosecute a case. Matter of fact, in Maryland, which is another Dillon law state or a Dillon rule state, where supposedly, the state controls everything and local governments just have to abide by state law. Baltimore's state attorney, Marilyn Mosby, has said that she will not prosecute individuals who are arrested for, low-level marijuana possession. Now, that's in a state with the exact same Dillon rule status as Virginia. And when Marilyn Mosby said, hey, you know what, I'm not going to bring these cases for low-level drug crimes, nobody freaked out and said, Marilyn Mosby, we're going to send in the National Guard. You probably need to send in the National Guard to Baltimore, Maryland to reduce the number of homicides. But nobody said that nobody on the left anyway said that, and I don't remember anybody on the right saying it either, nobody said that Marilyn Mosby was taking the law into her own hands and being an insurrectionist and needed to face consequences. No, that was fine. But when it comes to protecting the Second Amendment rights of Virginia residents, we now see that these lawmakers are intent not on public safety, but in going after the right to keep and bear arms itself and turning that right into a privilege. Again, I talked with Rob O'Donnell from Brothers Before Others about this topic and several others earlier today. Take a look and a listen. Well, Rob, thank you so much, sir, for coming on the program. It's good talking with you today.
Thanks for having me, Cam.
Absolutely. It has been an eventful few days, to put it mildly, here. Now, tell me about your connection to Pensacola. As the news was breaking on Friday about this attack by a Saudi airman on the base, someone who you're very, very close to was right there in the thick of this.
Yeah, at 7 our time, which would have been actually 8 our time, 7 their time, I received a text first from my son saying he was in an active shooter, and then immediately after a phone call explaining to me that there was an active shooter on base and looking for direction on what he should do. And at that point, I did hear gunfire in the background before I could even ask him if any shots were fired. From 12 or 1,400 miles away, with my background in dealing with this nationally for the past 3 decades, I've never felt so helpless in my life than having my son, call me for advice on what to do, and actually hearing gunshots in the background.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what that must have been like, and it sounds like he was very close to where this was all happening on that sprawling base.
Yeah, if you want to picture the building, this happened in the API building, which is the Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination building, where all our naval and marine aviators start their career once they're commissioned to be pilots. Now, this happened about 6:45 Pensacola time, and at 7 o'clock is their muster. So there's between 200 and 300 of these newly minted ensigns and second lieutenants that are arriving at that building to sign in and get their assignments for the day. So, the targeting of this time on that day was not by accident. Mm-hmm. Like I said, there were about 100 there when the shooting took place, and there were another 100 coming in, within the next 2 or 4 minutes. And you picture a schoolhouse. The building's probably 100 yards by 50 yards, couple floors. Looks like an old-time, schoolhouse. Mm-hmm. There's 3 entrances, mainly. There's the main entrance, the front entrance where the quarterdeck watch stands. There's the side entrance from the parking lot where most of the naval aviators, student aviators come in from. And then there's a rear entrance, for any other reasons. My son was coming in the side entrance when this began at the front entrance, and immediately turned around and fled to the parking lot. And the problem is that this building is a secure building, sort of like a skiff, where no cell phones are allowed in the building whatsoever. So all cell phones to be allowed have to be left in your vehicles. So fortunately, my son, when he fled to the parking area, was able to get to his vehicle and get his phone. Mm-hmm. Could hear the gunfire before he called me. Obviously, heard it when he was entering the building. That was the initial gunfire when the individual came in the front door and targeted the officer of the watch and the enlisted of the watch. And those are the Ensign Joshua Watson and the enlisted personnel that were there that were killed immediately, and still confronted this subject unarmed. Were able to escape out the front door, and while he was bleeding from 5 gunshot wounds, was able to give a description of who it was. Now, immediately at that morning, my son told me as they were fleeing out of the building, someone explained that it was a foreign national who opened fire. So I knew that pretty early, but until it was confirmed, by the Navy officials, I didn't want to put that information out. Mm-hmm. When I was speaking to the media that day. But, it was known right off the bat who opened fire here.
I know that Ensign Watson's family has said that, their son was a marksman, that he could have responded and reacted if he had been allowed to have a firearm, but was disarmed by base policy. What are your thoughts, Rob? I mean, it seems like this is really, you've got folks that are out there calling for more gun control laws, but the other side of that is here's a military base. And it sounds like the first armed response that this attacker saw was from the Escambia County Sheriff's deputies, who arrived on scene as quickly as they could. What do you think about the idea of, allowing members of our military to be armed while they are on base, given the attack both in Pensacola and the attack that took the lives of several civilians in Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, and Ensign Joshua Watson graduated from the Naval Academy with my son. They were friends. I actually spoke to his mother, Ensign Watson, which is one of the most hardest conversations I've had to have post-retirement in a very long time. Ensign Watson was a 4-year member of the Naval Academy rifle team. He was the captain of the rifle team. He was an expert pistol marksman and expert rifle marksman. He also did the firearms detailing during plebe summer, where he instructed 1,200 new incoming plebes to the Naval Academy on the proper use and qualification of both pistols and rifles. There is no doubt in my mind, if he was armed, he would have been able to either return fire and wounded or neutralize the subject. The base policies, which is a Clinton-era policy to not carry firearms on base, is ludicrous. These are the best of the best that our country can have there, and especially in Pensacola, where these are the top 3% of their classes, the naval aviators. Most of them are pistol and rifle expert qualified. There is no reason why these individuals shouldn't be armed.
Do you think that, as you say, this is a Clinton-era policy, do you think with the President Trump in the White House we have a chance to change this?
I hope so. And, when my son was home for Thanksgiving leave, he was home for 3 days. He has a firearm and he has a carry permit here in Pennsylvania. That's under Florida law. His Pennsylvania carry permit is recognized in Florida. So I said, hey, why don't you bring your Glock handgun back down with you? And his answer to me was, why, Dad? I'm on a base most of the time. I can't have it there anyway. What's the sense of bringing it down? But that's the conversation we had just a week prior to this shooting. There are resources for our men and women. That's what the Second Amendment's about.
Yeah.
Especially for our military. There are resources for them to have this. Why shouldn't they? Why shouldn't the officer on watch at least be armed by the Navy? If not, allow him to carry his own firearm if he has one.
Absolutely. And so I'm so glad, Rob, that your son is okay. And I'm glad that, honestly, I'm glad that the Watson family was able to talk with you. I'm glad that you were able to, hopefully provide some small comfort to the family. And then the news broke, just a couple of days ago about this shooting in Jersey City, New Jersey, where an officer apparently was ambushed, killed by these two suspects who then apparently targeted this kosher deli. And, it just seems like in that instance, Rob, again, you've got these folks who are calling for some unnamed gun control laws when the suspect in this case, one of them anyway, had a rap sheet about as long as my arm. He had multiple weapons offenses in the state of New Jersey. This was a guy who was prohibited by law from owning a firearm. New Jersey's gun control laws didn't stop him. And we've got folks who are, saying that the answer to addressing these types of violent acts against police officers and civilians are to make it harder for civilians to protect and defend themselves.
Yeah, Officer Seals, who was killed in the line of duty, is a member of the organization that I serve on the board for, Brothers Before Others. I do know Officer Seals. He's a family man with 5 children. His wife had 2 children that he's the stepfather to, and he had 3 children of his own. This is a tragic loss, not only to the law enforcement community, but the Orthodox community that was targeted for this event. And to speak about the gun control measures that you just talked about, Representative Rashida Tlaib this morning tweeted a picture of one of the Orthodox victims and said, this is what white supremacy does. Not realizing or just brushing by that this attack was committed by a known black supremacist group, the Black Israelites, a career criminal who targeted the Orthodox community. But, her narrative is, let's blame this on the catch-all white supremacy gun owners. And that's who's making the laws or trying to make the laws or change the laws in Washington. And it's just reprehensible. And she needs to be challenged, and any representative like her needs to be challenged. New Jersey has some of the most restrictive gun laws in our nation. If the Orthodox community, the business owners there, were allowed to have firearms, this may have been, again, either halted, slowed down, or terminated without the firing of almost 1,000 rounds, from what I'm hearing. I was listening to the radio communication because many members of our organization, Brother Before Others, were at the scene and there. Mm-hmm. Friends of mine were there. To hear the officers putting over there was a school across the street, a Catholic school right from this store. 2 officers were pinned down in there while they were hiding children on the floors behind pillars, saying that they were out of ammo and needed magazines. Now, your average officer carries 46 rounds, 3 full magazines with their pistol. So that's almost 100 rounds that were fired by these guys, who were continually taking rounds through the window into the school by these suspects that were in the building across the street.
It's unbelievable. And we've got, here in New Jersey, here in Virginia, we've got, our governor and politicians who want to turn the state into New Jersey when it comes to these laws. And we've seen the rise of the Second Amendment sanctuary movement. We've seen a number of sheriffs around the state that are speaking out and saying we're not going to enforce these unconstitutional gun control laws. Now Governor Ralph Northam is threatening, quote unquote, consequences. We've seen Representative Donald McEachin, who represents the 4th Congressional District in Virginia, say that maybe the National Guard needs to be called out to these Second Amendment sanctuary communities. Rob, it is so ridiculous that, these politicians keep pushing the disarmament of American citizens, turning a right into a privilege, with the idea that somehow that's going to stop the type of individuals that took the life of Officer Seals, took the life of these civilians, and try to take as many innocent lives as possible.
Yeah, criminals are criminals. Criminals are going to obtain their methods, but through criminal means, regardless of any laws that are passed. Murder's illegal, it still happens. Drugs are illegal, they still happen. The fact that these politicians are talking about prosecution and turning the National Guard on their law enforcement because they don't follow their policies is because they don't have skin in the game. They're not the ones knocking on these doors saying, hey, we're here to take your firearm. They're leaving it to others to do that work. That when that happens is going to turn into a fight, most likely. It's going to turn into a confrontation, be it verbal, be it physical, be it via firearm. When you go to take people's constitutional rights away by force, unlawfully, you're going to get a response. These politicians don't care about that because they're not the ones on the other side of that door that are getting responded to. They're putting people like myself and people I represent, the law enforcement of this community, and people in our military now bringing up the National Guard in that line of fire because they have no skin in the game.
Absolutely. Have you been in contact with any law enforcement officers in Virginia talking about the Second Amendment sanctuary movement?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And they outright do not support it. They're mostly, if not all, gun owners themselves. And the response is, if you unlawfully try to come to my home to take my guns for unlawful reasons, there's going to be a line drawn in the sand. And that's not just coming from your everyday citizen. That's coming from your people in the military, active and retired. That's coming from your law enforcement, both active and retired.
Yeah.
This is going to turn into a situation that is going to get out of hand very quickly if they try to start taking these weapons away unlawfully from our American citizens.
What do you think, if you were advising Governor Northam, not that it'd take advice from you or I, but if you were advising Governor Northam, what would you tell him?
The laws in Virginia have worked. Virginia has always been a gun-friendly state. What has changed? The data does not support what they're trying to do. They're trying to monopolize on these isolated individuals incidents that they can grab the heartstrings of the public in their community to say, oh, we need to do this because look, when you dive into the actual incidents they're pointing out, they're not widespread. They're not increasing. They're not endangering the public more than any other time before. This is doing nothing more than taking tragic situations to propel their individual agendas.
Rob O'Donnell with Brothers Before Others. Give us the website for Brothers Before Others, Rob, if you don't mind.
brothersbeforeothers.org, and we also have a Brothers Before Others public Facebook page that we post a lot of things to our public.
Excellent. Well, listen, man, I appreciate you coming on the program again. I'm so grateful that your son is okay. Our thoughts and our prayers, of course, are with those families who are mourning and grieving right now. But I appreciate your time, appreciate everything you do, and hope we get a chance to talk again very soon. Thank you for having me on, Cam. Always good, Rob. Rob O'Donnell joins from Brothers Before Others here on Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. All right, let's get to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, our recidivism report as well. If I will start there from California, My News LA on an ex-con days after release from jail, arrested for fondling a sleeping woman. Yeah, My News LA says 38-year-old David Rivasea, charged with burglary and assault with intent to commit a sex offense, both felonies, as well as a misdemeanor kind of disorderly conduct. He allegedly broke into an apartment about 6:20 Thursday morning, began groping the resident as she slept, according to Santa Ana Police Captain Anthony Bertagna. Woman woke up as he was fondling her, then shouted for help. That's when Saya ran away. Bertagna says her brother wakes up, sees the guy running, and the chase is on. Brother ran Saya down, held him until police arrived. Police took the suspect to a hospital to be treated for injuries suffered in the scuffle with the victim's siblings. According to court records, My News LA says Saya was released from custody on Saturday. Yeah, less than a week ago, after serving what probation officials call a, quote, flash incarceration from a probation violation. He pleaded guilty September 13th to criminal threats. He was sentenced to a year in jail, but he was released because, according to court records, he had already served enough time behind bars while his case was pending. He was wow. Okay. According to court records, he was found in violation of probation October 25th. That's 6 weeks after he got out of jail. He was sent back to jail for another 120 days. On October 25th, he was given credit for 32 days already served. He's still on 5 years probation. In August of 2018 in California, Saya was sentenced to 2 years in prison for a series of probation violations, stemming from a 2017 plea bargain for carrying a dirk or a dagger. When he was released from prison in January of this year, My News LA says he failed to report to probation, was arrested again in February on the criminal threats case. Saya apparently has a, quote, extensive criminal history dating back to 1998 with arrest for burglary, assault with a deadly weapon, possession of a controlled substance, multiple violations, possession of drug paraphernalia, parole violations, as well as gang activity, sale of cocaine, possession of a switchblade, given a false identification to police. Despite that laundry list of charges and convictions, in California, the criminal justice system, again, seems to be far more interested in legal gun owners than they are in violent criminals like Mr. Saya, who is the subject, again, of today's recidivist report. On to our armed citizen story of the day from Illinois, Decatur, Illinois, where a woman shot the father of her child in self-defense after she was attacked in her vehicle, according to police. This comes from the Herald Review newspaper. Sergeant Chris Copeland with the Decatur, Illinois police says the woman told authorities that she shot her ex in front of his home. Police began their investigation. They contacted the 29-year-old woman who had several injuries to her face when they talked to her from the man battering her while she was inside her vehicle. She had a shunt in her head from a previous injury, and Copeland said that a blow to the head could be fatal. Sergeant Copeland said that the woman told police she shot the man in self-defense. He said that the woman is not facing charges for the shooting, but she is facing a preliminary charge of aggravated unlawful use of a weapon because she did not have a concealed carry license. She's being held on $75,000 bond. Meanwhile, the guy who actually assaulted her and was shot, he's facing charges of domestic battery and unlawful vehicular invasion. He was held on $10,000 bond and is actually already bonded out. So the guy who battered his ex is already back out on the streets. The ex who defended herself with a legally owned firearm is now behind bars on $75,000 bond because she did not possess a concealed carry license. Again, there are 15 states around the nation right now where if you can legally own a gun, you can legally carry a gun. In those 15 states, what this woman did would not have been a crime. In many other states where you can transport a firearm in your vehicle without a concealed carry license, this would not have been a crime. But in Illinois, you cannot have a firearm in your vehicle. You cannot be transporting a firearm, apparently, unless it is, locked up, unloaded in the trunk where you can't use it for self-defense, unless you have a concealed carry license. Now, it is my fervent hope that the state's attorney in this case is going to take a look at this and say, there's no way in hell I'm bringing charges against this woman for defending her life. But as things stand right now, she, the woman who actually defended herself from this attack, she could actually be looking at more time behind bars than her attacker. Unreal. All right, let's get to our good deed of the day from Fox 8 in Cleveland, Ohio, where a good Samaritan, deputies with the Erie County Sheriff's Department, police, helping to rescue a pregnant woman who ended up in a pond in her vehicle. This was in Vermillion, Ohio. It was Wednesday evening, about 7:15. Sheriff's report says the driver went off the roadway and then, quote, overcorrected, then went back onto the roadway, then went back off the other side of the roadway and into a pond. Fox 8 in Cleveland says a man who witnessed the crash called police, told the 911 dispatcher that the water was up to the car doors and the woman could not get out of the vehicle. He actually got on top of the woman's car and stayed with her until help arrived so that police could better see where they were. Deputies and police were able to get the woman out of the car. Erie County Chief Deputy Jared Oliver says it was a team effort. Woman taken to a local hospital and is expected to make a full recovery. Thanks again to the quick actions of law enforcement and the Good Samaritan there, who did not, again, just call police, but decided to get involved in saving that woman's life as well. In the right place at the right time and willing and able to do the right thing. We thank everybody there for their very good deed. That is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. Just a reminder, tomorrow we're looking at an all-email edition of the program, answering your questions, your comments. So get them in, cam.edwards@bearingarms.com. That is the email address. And we'll get to your thoughts on Friday's Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. Thanks for being a part of the program today. Don't forget, you can subscribe to the program at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, townhall.com's podcast page, Town Hall Media at YouTube. You can also become a VIP subscriber at Bearing Arms. You get exclusive content and commentary. And we do appreciate your support. Thanks so much for watching, for listening, for spreading the word. Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you back here Friday with a brand new edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company.